And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rupert to you from ManvsMachine. Please give up.
Thank you very much. Firstly, sorry I'm not quite dressed as smartly as Mate here. He looks very sharp, as you can see. Brilliant. Thank you for having me talk at this event, Mate. My name is Rupert Burton. I head up the 3D department at ManvsMachine in London. We are a design and motion studio specialising in brand identities for a wide variety of global clients. What's nice about the company is we're quite small, and generally there's not much of a hierarchy, so everyone acts as a designer, an animator and a creative, and then people tend to specialise in the areas that really interest them. So it's nice, you end up working within a number of different roles, so you don't really get too bored, which is good. If any of you are in the Shoreditch area, please stop in, say hello. We're there pretty much 24/7. I promise I make a very good cup of tea. Okay, what I'm going to be talking about this evening is a number of projects we have done for these guys here. We've worked directly with Nike for a couple of years now, and what's nice is that we've never had an agency involved whatsoever. So Nike will come to us sometimes with quite an open brief, so we have quite a lot of freedom to play around. Other times they have more of a kind of strict idea of what they want from us. But so far it's generally been, here's a shoe, make a rad looking film. When I was actually putting this talk together, I realised for the next 30 minutes, basically I'm just going to be bombarding you with shoe porn. So if sexy looking footwear is not your thing, then apologies in advance. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my background and how I got into the industry, and kind of what drives me to work in the industry, and also how I think the technology is changing, which is allowing us to rethink new possibilities within design and motion. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you is a film that we made for the Air Max Zero a few months back. So we were approached by Nike to produce this campaign for the Air Max Zero, which is the original trainer designed by Tinker Hatfield back in 1985. This was to coincide with Air Max Day, which is a global event where everyone wears their Air Max trainers. A slightly weird concept in itself, but must make Nike a shitload of money. And the idea was to recreate Tinker Hatfield's office and then go back in time, revealing all the Air Maxes along the way back to the Zero. And so we designed all these bubble animations to kind of transition between the shoes, and it was supposed to be a very playful piece. So the first thing we did was we recreated Tinker Hatfield's office, like so, and we shot the opening couple of shots on a 5D. We wanted that to kind of blend into the live action, into the visual effects. So we used a really good DOP called Dave Tree for this. This is just a little bit of reference that I shot on my iPhone. It's always nice when doing a visual effects shoot to try and get as much reference as possible. So this is really good to see how the light is interacting with different things on the table. We then shot high-res texture maps for everything on the table because we had to recreate the entire thing, obviously in 3D. So little things like this were just really useful for us to then use in post. As you can see, my Steadicam skills are next level. We then created a really clean HDRI, obviously trying to make the lighting setup feel exactly the same as the live action front end, so pretty much the entire thing was lit with just this one really clean HDRI image, and then that's our 3D scan on the table and the lighting setup looking all sexy. So we then designed some different bubble type to fit along each of the different Air Max trainers, and these coincided with the animations. So as the shoes transitioned, we then had these specific bubbles for each one transitioning as well. And we had 9 whole trainers to attempt to model up, which was a terrifying thing to do. So we went to a really great 3D scanning company that we've used before called FBFX Digital in Shepperton Studios. And these guys are amazing. They're basically just, we give them the shoe, it comes back absolutely perfect. I mean, there's absolutely no way that we could have modeled this using traditional techniques. So this is great. This just takes so much hassle off our backs, which is fantastic. So these are the little scans here, and that's the render of it on the table which we modelled. So as you can see, we're already getting quite close to the live action. Okay, this is a little development reel of some cool looking bubble animations. Okay, so that's some process for you. Another really nice thing about working with Nike is we get to see our 3D content printed out and turned into installations in Nighttown. So this was in Oxford, the Oxford Street branch, and this was all the bubble type which we designed for the Stills campaign, and it's just pretty cool seeing that manifest itself in the real world. It looks pretty cool. We've actually got that bubble type in our office at the moment, actually, which is alright. Okay, so a little bit about me. I went to art school up in Glasgow, where I spent most of my time making really bad paintings and taking lots of cheap drugs. And when I graduated with a fine art degree, I was pretty much the most unemployable person in the country, because a fine art degree doesn't really get you very far these days. And at the time I was travelling to London to see my sister, and she was living with one of the directors from FAUX. Now, if anyone can remember these guys, oh, that was my art school in Glasgow, by the way. They did a number of early Bjork music videos. This one was for Unravel, and the more famous one, Nature is Ancient. And this guy Patrick would get his laptop out and just show me all this really incredible, beautiful, organic looking 3D that I just never seen before, and it was completely incredible to see that for the first time. And I think what I took away from it was the fact that here were 3 guys using these tools to make just kind of groundbreaking, really visually arresting work. And I'd always assumed you had to work for a really big film production company to kind of pull off work like this. So I think that was a really big inspiration for me getting in the industry. I think what art school had taught me, it was a lot about aesthetics and composition and observation. So when I decided to teach myself 3D, I was always more drawn towards the rendering side of things, so exploring materials and texture and lighting. So I moved to Camberwell College of Art and did a master's where I wrote a thesis on simulations and lighting, which was called How Photography Through Image-Based Lighting Has Reassessed Notions of Perceptual Realism in CGI, which sounds rather pretentious, and to save you the bore of explaining it, basically just meant that HDRI lighting makes stuff look real. But it was good because it allowed me to figure out what areas I wanted to specialise in when going into the industry. So when I became a generalist, I always knew that there was one particular area that I really wanted to get into. Okay, back to shoe porn. This was a job that we did for the launch of the Mercurial Superfly early last year. Okay, so that was a launch film just before the World Cup last year, and was worn by Cristiano Ronaldo himself. The campaign played on the lightness and the speed and the strength of these boots. I don't know if anyone's actually picked them up, but they're incredibly light. So we wanted to show the textural qualities of the upper fly knit fabric and how this could be generated in quite an abstract and beautiful way. Alongside that, we turned a line of defenders into this classical marble sculpture, and then had the boots shatter through them. So we started off with some thread R&D for the fly net. It was quite nice getting in there and just looking at the detail of threads. Got the boot scanned. This was actually the first job that we tried 3D scanning, and again, looking at that, there's just absolutely no way we could have modelled that using traditional techniques. So what's nice is you get a really clean 8K texture map as well, which you just slap straight on, and then, hey, it makes it look real, which is pretty cool. So we then got 5 footballers down to FBFX in Shepperton Studios and had them throw themselves over this little stage. We really wanted to have this kind of aggression and these really dynamic poses. And it was kind of terrifying because there was only this one little meter squared stage for them to jump on, while these 100 cameras all captured them at once, and quite often they were falling over and almost breaking the entire equipment. But as you can see on the clothes, we actually flecked some paint on there because for the software to actually pick it up. If it was too flat or too shiny, the software wasn't actually going to generate the 3D model, so we had to ruin the kits. But yeah, that all came out pretty well. So here you can see the process from capture through to the point cloud, and then the raw generated model at the end. This is some, so after that we gave it to the ZBrush artists. They had a couple of ZBrush artists in-house, and we got them to turn them into these marble sculptures. So here's some beard development, and you can see the bottom one is maybe a little bit too much like a Greek god. I don't think I've seen many footballers with beards like that, so we toned it back one. And this was a look at the marble texture. We actually really wanted that kind of nice physical looking SSS material. Okay, and then came the really fun part. We just got to smash the shit out of it. This was really great actually, because as soon as we composed the entire sculpture, it already felt really, really dynamic, and then as soon as we just blew it to pieces, it just added this whole other sort of element of movement in there, and yeah, we were pretty chuffed with it actually. There's quite a lot of pieces that it got blown into. So that was pretty fun, and then it got turned into a big stills campaign. So that's Ronaldo himself smashing through them, and we got to render the marble again, looking quite nice and tactile. Again, really nice working with Nike when they want to turn this into a big installation in Nike Town. So we actually got to see these models 3D printed and put into the front of Nike Town again, and then this was played on the outside. So generally quite a big campaign for us, which was great. This is another making of. exploding things all the time. We then did a stills campaign for the CR7s, which was another brand of boot for Ronaldo. So this time, same again, we went and scanned 5 footballers, and this time we had them broken into these big ice shards. And it was great. You know, we used a number of different pieces of software for the shattering. But what was quite nice is that you could really specifically choose areas that you wanted to kind of blow up and which ones you wanted to kind of keep intact. And then this was another one for the Elastico campaign. This was more of a concrete-based one. I think this shoe was aimed more at five-a-side, so the sort of youth generation. Yeah, so generally lots of cool shattering going on there. Okay, so I think what we'd learned from that last project really was how important the R&D phase is within our pipeline. You know, I think if you invest and you spend the time learning new techniques and building complex solutions and really kind of getting into the architecture of the software, then not only hopefully will your work look better, but I think you'll also carry it forward onto the next job. So we basically implemented 3D scanning into all of our night jobs since this campaign. Obviously on short deadlines it's not really feasible, but if you do even just have that week at the beginning of a project, it's so worth investing some time in R&D. I think quite often these days software can feel disposable. You know, you start a new job, you have to pick up 2 or 3 new pieces of software and then you move on. So you learn on the job and you have to adapt and figure out kind of what will be the right tools for the job at hand. I think some of our most interesting work has just come about during this really early development phase when you're playing around and you're open to happy accidents and you know, something new and random and kind of interesting comes out of just playing around. And next thing you know, you pitch it as a wildcard to the client and they absolutely love it, and then you stand back and go, oh my god, I can't believe they're paying us to just play around in 3D, this is kind of amazing. Obviously that doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's a good feeling. Okay, back to these guys. This is a job we did for the Luna 3 Flynet runner. So we wanted to really highlight the soft and the light features of the Luna 3 while creating a film that was based on the intensity and the cadence of a performance runner. Again, it was quite heavily focused on the Flynet technology. So this was one of the early style frames that we pitched. And the idea was to have this invisible Flynet layer that sat just above the ground so that when the shoe came down, it cushioned the impact and sent out this ripple of Flynet. And it was supposed to be kind of sculptural and slightly beautiful. And this was just some development really of what that could have looked like. So we actually spent quite a long time thinking it could be either particle based or maybe thread based. But yeah, some of these ended up looking pretty cool. And here's some mood boards just for the environments. We wanted to be in a generic urban environment and over the course of a single day, and for some of the terrain to highlight certain aspects of the shoe. Obviously we 3D scanned it and render. This is a different colorway, this was for the men's. But it just allowed us to get the camera in super close to pick up some of that detail in the Flynet. I mean, there's just no way we could have, you know, textured that or kind of modeled it. So again, 3D scanning really helped us out there. And then this was some of the stills campaign at the end of the project. And this is how we made it. Cool, that's how we made it. Right, I want to talk a little bit about this process here. And particularly about kind of physically based rendering. You know, everyone's arguing these days which renderer to use, you know, which renderer makes things look more real than reality itself, and it's such a boring conversation. But everyone's trying to, you know, everyone's seeking to kind of get that looking as good as possible. And I think most of the physically based renderers, they kind of do the same thing. You know, they get you 90% of the way there. They all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses. But I think for that final 10%, and this is going to sound so obvious, but you know, use your eyes. They're pretty much your most valuable asset. I can't stress that enough. I think that, you know, they determine whether or not something looks real. I think too often we rely on the software to determine how things should be built, you know, physically, blah, blah, blah. But I think if it's not looking real, then it's not correct, essentially. Really obvious point that, but I just really wanted to stress it. Another debate is obviously how much you rely on the compositing process. I've seen skilled compositors turn a render into a piece of artwork, absolutely. But I've also seen a really nicely lit and rendered image pulled apart into different multipasses and then kind of over-composited to death, and it just completely kills the image. So I don't think at all there's a right or wrong answer here at all, but I think it's dependent on the complexity of the animation, complexity of the scene, for sure. But I don't think that it's an absolute given. I think also in the motion design industry, one of the biggest challenges is how we can animate and simulate things that don't exist in the real world, but make them look physical. You know, I think it's the fun part of our job, is to invent new visuals, you know, to create new worlds and new characters and new possibilities. But then how can we actually make them look tactile? I think that's the sort of future and the really interesting part of motion design. Because ultimately, I think if an image looks digital but is trying to look photographic, then it's not working. There's something about looking at slightly badly rendered 3D. It leaves you feeling slightly cold, almost. I don't know. You feel slightly cheated because you can see how it's been done. So the aim is always to make the software feel invisible. And through doing so, you make the image authentic, and through doing so, you kind of humanize it in a way. This is a really nice quote by Lev Manovich, who is an author on new media theory, and he says, each new technological development points to the viewer just how unrealistic the previous image was, and also reminds them that the present image, even though more realistic, will be superseded in the future. I think this is a really interesting point. You know, working with technology, I think you have to accept the fact that your work is going to date. So the key is to try and make it date as slowly as possible. Okay, back to Shoe Porn. This is a film that we made for the Air Max 90 collection a few years back. Okay, so this was a really open brief, actually, for us. We had a lot of fun playing around with it. It was the first time that the Air and the Lunar and the Flyknit technologies had all come together. So from the start, we just started to abstract different elements of the shoe. So this was one of the first things that we pitched, actually, with the Lunar and the Air coming together. And we wanted to create these two different environments, one for the lunar, which was set in a sports stadium, and the other for the air, which was just supposed to be in this generic, really open, outdoorsy space. And it was all about the kind of convergence of these two worlds. We then made one for the Jacquard, which was more geared towards the Flynet technology. And this one was for the ice one. So once again, nice thing about working with Nike is you get to see your work manifest itself in the real world. So that always looks pretty cool. These were a stills campaign as well. We rendered these out pretty high resolution, so it's always nice seeing it super close up. And another part of the job is it's always quite fun to geek out over typographic elements as well, especially when you've been working in more of a visual effects world. It's quite good to come back to the 2D side of things. And here's a little process. Okay, straight on to the next one. This was for the KD7, which is Kevin Durant's 7th basketball trainer. So we didn't have much time to make this, so there's not much development. But the general idea was apparently Kevin Durant has 7 different ways that he attacks on the basketball court. So we wanted to use this adaptable armoured sculpture to sort of morph and create these 7 different gestures. So here's just some mood board images of the different types of armoured plating we were going to use. And here are some of the different designs for the moves themselves. I've actually forgotten most of the names of them. One's called the Smooth Fade, I know that. That's not called a Claw, I also know that. But they all end up looking pretty good. Okay, so I think it's obviously a very exciting time to be working in the industry when there's this much new technology that's coming out. I think what's really driving a lot of people isn't necessarily just the fact that they want to design nice content for brands. You know, I think good design and filmmaking principles don't really change. They generally stay the same as time goes on. I think what's really exciting people, it's how rapidly the technology is changing that's allowing us to rethink new possibilities within these fields. I think once we reach the stage where we can simulate and render the real world so easily, where do you go from there? How can generative or interactive or even real-time elements be incorporated into the pipeline? I think brands will always want to be seen using cutting-edge technology, and I think when design and 3D operate at that intersection, I think that's when really interesting things can occur. I want to show you next probably my favourite thing I've ever seen on the internet. I'll let you watch it first and then I'll explain it. It is genius.
Oh shit! Oh! Hey, on t'entend être correct? Ah ouais, mais là, c'est tout ça. Oh, ça va? Oh non! Hey, il est où là? Il est où?
So I don't know if anyone saw this, but yeah, it got released as a viral video online, and everyone went crazy about it. The whole of Canada went into a state of panic about golden eagles coming in, snatching babies. It was a serious threat that was in the news. I believe even Fox News had it up on their website, because it's a terrifying thing, golden eagles snatching babies. Social media went crazy as well, and it's just an incredible thing really to see how one video can send people into so much fear. Anyway, it soon later came out that it was actually made by a bunch of Canadian animation students as a hoax, and they'd actually just rigged and animated this eagle and done a little bit of clever comp, and the whole thing was completely fake. And I think the potential of that is absolutely huge. I think that the idea that I can show you a video that will manipulate you into believing that that event actually happened, that is incredible. I think that for me is the future of 3D in a way. Kind of blows my mind. Genius. Okay, I'm going to show you the last piece that we've done for these guys here. I'm not really going to talk about it. There's a little process reel after I show you this, but it was for the Kobe 8, which is Kobe Bryant's 8th shoe, and it's all based on his alter ego, which is the Black Mamba. Okay, and here's how we made it. Okay, that's it from me. I hope I haven't brainwashed you all into buying Nike products. Thank you.